Just Come Over. This is book number 12 of the Escape to New Zealand series. This is by Rosalind James. Now, I have read several of her books. I have not read all 12 of them. And what you need to know about this is that these are all rugby players in New Zealand. We they call them football players. We would call them rugby players. But all these characters in all 12 of these books are tall, dark, handsome, smart, fit, and kind. This story starts with Zora and Reese. Zora was married to Reese's brother, Dalen. Dalen died 2 years ago, and he had a child. Zora and Dalen had a child together. Reese is her brother in law, and he really kept his distance from her. And the reason why he did was from the very first time he met her, he liked her. But his baby brother was with her, and so he used restraint and never made any kind of advances toward her. Now it's 2 years later. Dalen has died, and he has left a mess. Now Reese comes in after the 2 years of death, and he comes in and he meets Zora and finds out that she is really struggling financially. Now, Reese is a retired football or rugby player. He's now a coach in this new town, and he's living in the same town with Zora. Zora and her son have been struggling because Dalen didn't have his stuff together, and he didn't leave them in good financial status for after his death. As it comes to find out, Zora was going to leave Dalen because he really wasn't a good guy. But before she could do that, he became ill, and she couldn't leave him in his illness. So she stayed with him until his death. Dalen left a mess, and he covered up a mess, and his cousin helped cover up a mess with him. He had a child. He was also a rugby player, and he went to the United States, and he had a child outside of his marriage to Zora in the United States. He put his brother Reese's name on the birth certificate. So Reese is notified that he has a child in the United States. The mother has been killed in a car accident, and he is the only family that they can locate. Now Reese is like, I don't have a child. And they said, well, your name is on the birth certificate. You have to go take care of this child. Well, come to find out, Dalen had done this with his cousin as a witness and put his name on the birth certificate, Reese's name on the birth certificate. And it was during the time period that he was engaged to be married to his wife, now ex-wife. And so Zora finds out about this little girl who's about 5 or 6 years old, and she puts it together, and she's thinking, really reevaluating how she feels about Reese, because before she thought he was this terrible guy, when really he was just trying to keep his distance from her. So now she finds out that he has this child, and the child had to be conceived when he was engaged to his now ex-wife. And so now she thinks, okay, he's a dog and all men are dogs. Well, somehow Zora finds out that even though Reese never told her and accepted that little girl as his own, she finds out that that was Dalen's little girl and not Reese's. So now they're really getting to know each other, and she begins to see him in a different light. The brother-in-law, who is a good man, who is going to let that girl not let that little girl know that that she isn't his father. She has no one left. Her mother died suddenly. She has no other relatives, and Reese is it. And so she's really been taken from New York to New Zealand, and she has nobody. And he really does the stand-up thing and takes care of her, never lets her know that he is not her father legally, and he's going to take care of her. Well, as it all unfolds, there's only a few people that know that Reese is not the father of this child. But Zora finds out because before Dalen got sick, he had set up an account to take care of the woman. But when he got sick, there was nobody to follow up. And so the bank is sending her stuff like, you need to come and check this account. She finds the money. She finds out where the money was going, and she understands what happened. Now she is pissed at Reese because he basically has been lying to her about the child. And he just pretty much said, look, why would I tell you? What was it going to prove? And this is my child. I am her father. I'm going to take that on. Now, I know people get judgy and they're thinking, those two going to hook up. That is his dead brother's wife, his nephew. Really? They're going to hook up like that? I don't know. Some of my friends say that that's like you don't do that. You just stay away from that. I don't know. The story as it was presented, it's difficult to say what you would do. I mean, I live and let live. Maybe nobody's getting hurt, but it is a judgy thing. Now, let me just say this about Rosalind James. I love her books. I love her. They're all romance, and like I said, I love romance. But this is what I really like about Rosalind James' book. She taught. They're basically set in New Zealand, and she really involves the native people of New Zealand in the culture of the book. She uses terms. She teaches us about the customs of the New Zealand people, the Morai. I'm probably saying it wrong, but their cultures, what they do, their family unit, how they take care of one another, really how they still kind of live on one of the islands in a close knit community. I love that she includes that in their culture and that she explains that. And her books are a little controversial with some of the subject matter, as like I don't know, maybe not controversial is the word, but a brother. What do you think? Do you think that it's okay for the brother-in-law, the brother, to marry the wife of his dead brother? I don't know. What do you think? Educated by Tara Westover. I enjoyed this book. It is a memoir of a young woman who grew up in Idaho, in the mountains in Idaho, with a survivalist family. They believed in minimal government intervention. They didn't go to hospitals. Their mother was a midwife and an herbalist. When they got sick, they took herbs or they took care of themselves. Now, Tara Westover's family are Mormon, but she goes to great lengths to really explain that she is casting no dispersions upon the Mormon faith. She believes that her father believed what he believed, and that was aside from any other Mormon teaching. She takes great pains really to explain that her father's behavior, and really, even though he was never formally diagnosed with any mental illness, it is clear by the behaviors that she described that he was either bipolar or schizophrenic, and maybe both. But he was never diagnosed, and clearly his behavior was not that at all of the Mormon teaching, but really of his own mental health. So she explains she grew up in the mountains of Idaho, and she had an older brother who grew up with her, but he left and went to school. Now, this was really, really considered an act of desertion by the family, but her brother did it. He left. She also, at 17, decided that she wanted to go get an education, and it's really a credit to her that she understood that she would live this kind of life always without being exposed to anything else if she did not get her education. So she really taught herself. She taught herself enough grammar, English, math to be able to be admitted into Brigham Young, which is where she initially started. She was bright enough to be able to be offered a scholarship to travel to London. And before she could travel to London, she had to get a birth certificate. Now, she was born at home. Her mother couldn't really even remember when she was born or what year. Other people had to come in and vouch. Finally, she was given a post-birth certificate, and that served as her birth certificate. So she really was kind of ostracized. Her family allowed it, and her father allowed her to go because she pretty much was strong and minded enough that she wanted to go. What was interesting though is that as Tara was growing up, she had a brother who was very physically abusive and emotionally abusive to her. And as she became older, she realized that this was not normal, that people did not experience this kind of verbal or mental or emotional abuse and manipulation from their siblings or their parents. And so once she got home, she got brave enough and got up enough courage to tell her parents how her brother had physically abused her. Her parents didn't believe her. They circled the wagons and told her that she was being influenced by the world and that she needed to recant. Now, when she was going through all this, she confided in her sister, who also believed her because she also had been abused by this father. I'm sorry, by the brother. But when she went to her parents, they pretty much said, you need to recant or you are no longer a part of this family. Now, you have to remember that this family was very tight knit. They did not let other people in. They did not have extended social networks. This was it for them. So for them to say you are no longer going to be a part of this family, it was a really big deal. Eventually, the older sister recanted and wanted Tara to do the same, but she couldn't do it. She knew what had happened, and she knew she had been abused by her brother, and she was not going to recant. She was so afraid that she was emotionally traumatized that her mother knew it, said she was going to support her, and then went exactly behind what she said she was going to do. She did have an older brother that believed her after she finally told him about it. And she was scared too because she had already told her sister, thought her sister was going to back her up, and she didn't. And then she told the brother she felt like he was going to do it, and finally he did back her up, and she felt vindicated and was able to move forward and get the mental health that she needed to deal with all that had happened to her. In the end, they had really a split sibling where half of the siblings stayed with the family and never said there was anything wrong, and the other half didn't. This family actually grew to be quite wealthy, and the other siblings were dependent on them financially. Now, I have to say, to Tara Westover's credit, there are several incidences that she recounts in the story that when she goes back to interview them, the people who she interviewed and talked to did not remember the story as she did. It was significantly different. But she continues to stand by that story because these are her memories, what she recalls and how she feels about them. It is clear that she is a bright young woman. It is clear that she was traumatized by that upbringing, but it's also clear that she loves her parents and would really want to be a part and reconciliated with the family. But because to do that, she would have to say that she was not traumatized by her brother. She remains estranged from her family. This is really a book of triumph, of spirit, of determination, of what can happen when you have one person in your corner fighting for you. This book was Educated by Tara Westover. Okay, this next book, as you guys know, y'all know I love romance, and this next book was by Mariana Zapata. The first book I read in 2019 was by Mariana Zapata. This was also a romance novel. I love romance, but this book dragged for me. It was 493 pages. Now, I picked this book because it kept coming up on my feed, and I had read that first book and really, really enjoyed it, so I read it. Oh my goodness, I struggled, and I almost gave up several times. But I am one of those people that once I start reading a book, no matter how bad it gets, I have got to finish it, and so I did. The story is of Ivan Lukov and Jasmine Santos. They are world renowned skaters. Ivan Lukov has won Olympics, world championships multiple times in a row. Jasmine Santos has had her own success, but really never reached the high pinnacle that Ivan does. They are childhood friends. They've known each other forever, and they hate each other. Ivan, for some reason, loses his partner in pair skating, and Jasmine has lost her partner, and they hook up. Now, let me just say this. I did not like Jasmine Santos in this novel. She was 26 years old and she acted like she was 16. It was all about her all the time. Ivan Lukov was 30 years old. He was a bit more mature and a bit more reflective and was a bit more considerate of other people's feelings, but it was a struggle. Jasmine Santos had some issues, and they briefly go into the fact that she had a severe learning disability, so much so that she didn't want anybody to know. And that's, a valid point. A lot of people who have learning disabilities feel like they're dumb or stupid, and they don't want people to know. They don't reach out and ask for help because they don't want to feel dumb or stupid, when really and truly we know that it's just a different way of learning. But anyway, she did not want anybody to know, and she would spend hours and hours working and perfecting something because it took her a little bit longer to get it. She just didn't process information the same. And so it briefly touches on that difficulty of hers. And because of that, perhaps that's why she acted like such a brat a lot of the times. It was maybe a defense mechanism. But it was really kind of annoying in a 26-year-old to still be behaving like that. We learn about Jasmine's mother, who is the rock. Her mother realized that this was the one thing in Jasmine's life that made her feel validated and that she was good at. And though it was expensive and hard for her mother to maintain the lessons and the competitions and the fees, she did it because she knew that that's what her daughter needed. Her father, who did love her, didn't understand it. He wanted her to go to school, and he felt like she was just not listening. You could learn if you want to. He really couldn't get it past the thought that she really had a difficult time learning, and that her learning had to be done in a different way. Her education should have been tailored in a different way. He felt like she just didn't want to do it, and so all she had to do was work at it. So she had some issues with her father. He also left. She was the youngest of the 4 children, and he left, and she felt like that was because of her. So I'm sure some of her behaviors were abandonment issues with her dad leaving. He never did come to many of her ice skating competitions. Her other siblings, she had a brother, 2 brothers, and a sister, and they were all very, very supportive. But her mother was the rock. Her mother was there for her child and would do whatever it took to be there for her child. It is unfortunate for us parents that our children do not realize what we do for them until they're in their 20s, as Jasmine does here. But she did finally get it that her mother had done all types of things to support her. In the end, it's a HEA. So in the end, they did get together, Lukov and Santos. But it was a struggle. I love happily ever after. I love romances. And I was kind of surprised because I really liked Mariana Zapato's first book that I read. But this one, it's a romance though, and I do love romance. So from Lukov with Love, it's still pretty high on the feed, so maybe it's just me that didn't care for it. Hey, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Thank you for those who do subscribe. And as always, be blessed and read.